All right, so this is your really quick video to talk about how to build your own goal path template. So in the past, I have built these for people and kind of said, this is how our conversation, our intake broke down. And this is specifically what I think you should be tackling right now in this order to kind of get to where you need to be. And I think that's a really important part of the process. And I would never want to lose the interactions that we have in our intakes. And I would never want to lose the insight and experience that I can offer in terms of how to do goal scaffolding and how to think about putting those Lego blocks all together. But part of why I'm making the decision to transition this part of the process into your hands is twofold, actually. The first reason why is it's critical in self-efficacy development for you to believe that you have the skills that you need to set your own course. That's actually the foundation of what self-efficacy is trusting yourself to have the skills and the tools at your disposal automatically. And so part of what we want to do when we're working on behavior change is move people further and further away from the coaching and more into the validation and the back and forth and the ideas and the visioning part of coaching, but away from the structure development part of coaching. And the reason why we want to shift in that direction is because ultimately, I don't want you to need me forever. Okay, I want you to nail a couple of goals so effectively that you internalize the process and you can start to apply this to various areas of your life, right? You can look and see how this can apply to buying a home or changing your job or changing how you eat, changing your sleep patterns, maybe even reevaluating your relationship, right? So taking time here to explore, especially because we're working with relatively superficial goals, right? We're working with things that have a fair amount of structure. It's really easy to measure and quantify how often you work out. It's really easy to measure and quantify whether or not you are eating 2 or 3 servings of vegetables a day. So in terms of goals and creating that neural path in your brain of change management, these are really good places to start because they're very tangible and you're able to really look at them and assess how things are going. But as we move forward, we're looking at kind of broader goals and that bigger picture of our personal vision, then there's going to be times where things are a little bit less tangible. Like I want to really improve my parenting. I want to be a more connected parent. That's something that a lot of people will talk about, and it can be hard to create tangible evaluations of how well that's going, right? And so it's still the same process, but it doesn't have quite the same neural feedback. So it's harder for the brain to contextualize what that means and to create scaffolding bricks because it doesn't necessarily have a strict pathway, right? There's so many different directions that you can take that kind of a goal. Okay, so what I would like to encourage you to try here is using your guidance document, using the information from the intake, and working with me, because I'm still here, I'm still happy to help you with it, working with me, coming up with your own idea of what does my baseline look like. So this actually is going to be a scaffold that we build from the baseline. So again, presuming that there is no crisis, presuming that you are doing okay, maybe not fantastic, but you're at acceptable levels of stress, moderate levels of self-care, okay? You're doing okay. What do you think you could achieve at a baseline level? What do you think is this is something that I could do now that I could probably sustain for a long time? So let's relate this back to exercise for 1 second. This is going to be your moderate intensity, maybe even low to moderate intensity activity. Going for a walk. I could go for a walk for a long time, right? And you can figure out what does a good pace feel like for walking for a long time. And you can start to feel as you go a little bit faster, oh, I might be starting to slow down. I don't know if I could sustain this pace. We're going to need to pull it back because my body is telling me this is too fast. My breath is getting a little bit more elevated. My heart rate is pounding. I'm getting hot. My muscles are tired. I can't go quite that fast. Okay, so your body is really good in exercise at giving you those cues of what you can sustain for a long time and what's going to burn you out. So I want us to start with the orange of in a relatively decent week, which most of us have once in a while, I am able to do this, right? And doing this should be meeting the minimum of what you probably need to feel healthy. Okay, so what does a good night's sleep look like for you? Is that 7 hours? Is that 8.5 hours, right? We all have different needs on that, and only you really know what that looks like. But your sleep goal should be, I generally feel rested when I have between 7 and 7.5 hours of sleep. That will be my sleep goal. I'm going to try that. Nutrition, I really like to make sure that I have at least 2 or 3 different vegetables and fruits every day. I know I'm not getting everything that I could, but I really like to try that. And I really like to make sure that I'm not eating out this week. So I maybe will eat out once, and that might be a goal that I put in there, right? And that might be associated with your growth focus goal. I'm going to increase my vegetable intake to what is probably a relatively decent amount for now. And I'm also going to avoid going to a restaurant or takeout. I'm only going to do that once this week. I'm going to really try to focus at eating at home. Right? Movement, same kind of thing, right? What your orange is going to be very different than my orange. Right now, my baseline, my movement baseline is I will teach all the classes I am meant to teach. That is what I can do. Is that my thrive? No. I would love to see myself running again. I would love to see myself consistently weightlifting for my body, right? Not just teaching people with weights that work for them, but using weights that work for me. Okay, so my thrive would be to be doing more than what I'm doing now. But my baseline is I'm getting 13 hours of exercise in a week, and that's probably pretty good. Let's be real, right? And so only you really know what that kind of baseline looks like. And we can talk about it. We can back and forth in your check-ins about what you want that to look like. And then from there, we're going to build up. I recommend starting by building down, looking and going, okay, so if that's my baseline and I feel pretty baselined right now, what would happen if I had a terrible week? What can I take off of this? What's a reasonable amount for me to take off and still feel like I'm moving forward? Still feel like I've got something connecting me to my self-care and to my personal growth. And so you can take a look at that and be like, okay, well, realistically, when I'm having a really stressed out week at work, I'm eating out more than once. I'm probably going to be eating out 3 times. But let's say that I'm not going to eat out more than 3 times. That's going to be kind of my no more than 3 times. That's where I end it. Because if we start going into 5 and 6 and 7, then we could take that escalation all the way into the black, and we don't want to do that. And remember, the black itself, you don't have to scaffold. The black itself has no goals. The black itself is just about protection and trying to move ourselves back out of the critical area and into an at-risk area where there's at least some back and forth of self-care, right? So coming out of orange and figuring out the red. What does it look like when things hit the fan and I'm just not feeling motivated and I've got nothing to work with? What can I still commit to that's realistic and fair? And then from there, going into our yellow. And that's where we're going to come in and say, okay, so I've got my baseline. This is a good week, but I want a little bit more. I want more than what I'm doing. Okay, I don't want to just be doing the minimum. I know that I can get 2 workouts in a week, and I know that I can make my way through that, but I envision a life where I'm physically active every day, and 2 workouts isn't going to get me there. So what is realistic at yellow that we can put in? Well, maybe yellow, I'm aiming for 3 or 4 workouts a week. Maybe yellow, I'm also aiming for a non-exercise activity like a walk outside or something like that, right? And so we can build on our sleep, nutrition, and movement goals and our growth goals by building a little bit off of what we had in orange. So taking all the goals in orange and saying, what's the +1 factor here? What would be this +1? Okay, and then from there, building off of your baseline and coming into green and saying, okay, so now that I'm here, what's the +2 from baseline? Okay, and I would, again, green is going to evolve because this is a living document. You will make it more often than once. As you hit green, then you're going to find that everything needs to shift because now your green has kind of become your yellow, right? And your old red is now your black because you're used to a better quality of life. And so everything keeps shifting up. And as it shifts up, you'll be able to add way more into your green than just 1 or 2 extra things off of your current baseline. Okay, you'll come to a point where where you can look and say, yeah, I can add running into this. Absolutely. And I can totally look at going back to school. That's realistic. But your green might not be there right now, right? We're trying to build a green that is reasonable and achievable within the next 6 months to a year. Okay, so we want to be vision focused, but we also want to be vision focused in a way that is reasonable and sustainable and manageable, and that doesn't send our brain into shock. Because when your brain has that energy shock and goes like, whoa, this was too much too fast, again, it kicks into that motivation equation and starts to make it harder for you to sustain things because it's not convinced it's going to have the energy it needs to keep going. So that's something for you to consider when you're building your green. Look at building either one level above yellow or 2 levels above orange. Okay, at most in your green, 2 levels above yellow. You don't want to go any further than that in your green. Again, you can always add on, but you don't want to set yourself up with goals that are unachievable and that you can't meet, because every time you don't meet a goal, you're sending your brain a negative check mark. And every time you do meet a goal, you're sending your brain a really positive check mark. So we want to add as many positive check marks as we can in your motivation equation to keep you feeling really focused and really believing that you're able to make the changes that you want to make. And that means keeping your vision really, really focused on what can I do that is achievable, that can give me that immediate satisfaction and validation that I can put into my brain's catalog of I am successful. And then from there, we continue to scaffold. So we can keep building levels of green upon green upon green, okay? And the whole scaffold will shift. And where I'm at now in my red and orange and yellow is vastly different than where I was at in my red, orange, and yellow a long time ago, okay? Black kind of stays the same. Black pretty much always looks the same. It's when you start to really feel like you've lost control and any sort of sense of connection. Okay, so that crisis mode. But with the other colors, they will shift. This is a living document. It's meant to be revisited. It's meant to be reprinted and scribbled on and bullet formed. So here are my base rules. Keep it simple. It does not need to be complicated. Keep it concise, okay? Use as little words as possible. And I know it's funny coming from me, but as little words as possible to put on paper what you want to do, okay? It can be bullet pointed and really, really, really fast. The only person who needs to understand it is you. Start at your orange, and if all you accomplish this week is identifying your orange, that's a huge start, okay? That's awesome. This doesn't have to all be done all at once, okay? You can start by just saying, okay, this week I'm going to identify my orange, and as I start to move out of orange, I'm going to start to think about what yellow looks like. Right? Or as I start to have a bad week in my red, I'm going to think about what red looks like and I'm going to add it to this document. But that process, that mental kind of decision making is part of what I want your brain to learn how to do so that you don't need me in the future and you're able to do it yourself.